So hi, I'm Ruth Cooper, the Assistant Librarian at Hazelton District Public Library. And this is my colleague, Lorette Lapalme. And what we're here to do now is give you an idea of the area and the people that the HDPL serves, show you how our outreach to First Nations through Summer Reading Club has grown and changed over the years. So the Hazelton District Public Library is founded in 1948, making it one of the oldest public libraries in BC. And it's resided in several different locations, including our...
Oh, sorry. I'm too busy listening. There we go.
Sorry. Including the iconic Riverboat Building in downtown Old Town, and then in 1990 to the Riverside Complex, which it shares with the Pioneer Museum and Archives. We currently serve the Kitimat-Stikine Regional District Area B. That's about 7,584 square kilometers in the northwest. That's a land area of more than 2 times the size of Metro Vancouver, from West and North Vancouver to White Rock to Maple Ridge. The library itself lies in the heart of unceded Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en territory, home of Delgamuukw and Gisdewe plaintiffs in the landmark Aboriginal rights case of the 1990s. Sorry, Lorette, that's my fault. Our area population has dwindled from nearly 8,000 in its peak near the end of the 1990s to its current level of just under 5,000 people. About 85% of the residents self-identify as First Nations or Métis. The Hazelton District Public Library has participated in Summer Reading Club since the very beginning. And you're going to have to show this next one, Lorette. And teenage Lorette was one of our... Where's your teenage Lorette? Was our 1989 Summer Reading Club student. And and we still love her. Our Summer Reading Club program was to do promotion in the schools and classrooms in June and then run 3 age group programs in the library, preschool, primary, and intermediate. This model worked best for families who already supported their children's early literacy, had a vehicle for transporting them to and from the library. They already had lives enriched by books, and they enjoyed the competitiveness of the race to read the most books, to earn a medal, and to win at Summer Reading Club. What this model did not do well was encourage reluctant readers to read over the summer, to reach families without cars who live more than walking distance from the library, and to offer cultural options for families. So we started some outreach in 2004. We partnered with Logs Lit Limo, which is a book bus that went to every community once every 2 weeks to give free books to everyone, no strings attached. And the beauty of that was these books are gifts, not loans, and that stayed in the community to be resources for the children to leave. The problem that we had was I went out on my days off, and we had to ask for funding so that I could go out on days when I was scheduled to work in the library. We got some from Success by Six through the advice of our early years table. And Success by Six is a United Way initiative funded by the province and the credit unions of BC. It worked well until we realized the children in the outlying areas were only getting half the programs because the book bus only went out once every 2 weeks. So we asked Success by Six for more money for so that we could recruit, train, and pay community facilitators to conduct the clubs in their communities. They were very supportive, especially of the capacity building piece, but sadly Success by Six folded this year, and I'm looking for new funding options, but our commitment to outreach remains strong.
Hi, my name is Beth Diamond, and I am the Children's Services staff member at the Prince Rupert Public Library. At our library, we are continually looking for ways to improve our connections with our First Nations community members. This only makes sense as we live on unceded Tsimshian territory, while over 30% of our population and almost 50% of our children aged 14 and under self-identify as Aboriginal. It also makes sense to bring aspects of First Nations culture into all of our summer reading clubs, whether we live on First Nations territory, in small towns, or in one of the bigger centers in our province. 2019 is the United Nations International Year of Indigenous Languages. What a perfect time to explore and share ways to include First Nations content in our summer reading clubs, as well as take the SRC out into smaller remote communities. Prince Rupert is situated on the north coast of BC, 750 kilometers by air and 1,500 kilometers by road from Vancouver. As isolated as we are the nearest larger center for several smaller coastal communities, including 4 First Nations communities that are northwest and south of us. All are accessible only by boat or seaplane. At various times and in various ways, we've been looking to connect with some of the communities in hopes of partnering to offer the SRC resources to any programs that might be running over the summer, or to set up a passive SRC program to use however they wish. This could be a bookcase or tote of donated books in an office or facility, with take-home kits containing reading logs and handouts. Although we have yet to be successful, this summer is looking very promising. We've been gradually building these connections over the past 4 or 5 years with mixed results. Although we haven't yet created an ongoing summer reading club program, we have been able to have visits into one community, participating in their school-wide literacy program, hosted a group of children and their families for a tour and magic show at the library, donated a tote of free books for the ferry that travels between our community and theirs, invited classes and families to visit the library while in town or while waiting to catch the ferry back home, included all 4 villages in our catchment area so that community members are entitled to free library access, supplied SRC materials and books to one of their summer programs, and supplied books to a teacher in another First Nations community several hours east of us. And these last 2 opportunities came about through casual conversations with the respective people while they just happened to be in our library, and we were thrilled that we were able to share resources and books with them. Within our own community, we strive to include First Nations content in all that we do. In regards to the SRC, we try to include Indigenous content throughout our program. This can include stories, word searches, coloring sheets, crafts, even a demonstration on how to make soapberry ice cream. We were very fortunate 2 summers ago to have an Indigenous SRC coordinator who shared her family's berries and traditions with all of our SRC program attendees. Many of the students reported this to be the highlight of the program. We've also connected with our local First Nations Friendship House regarding their own summer camp. We held a few extra SRC classes just for their club members at a time that fit their schedule. Our local Aboriginal Head Start preschool program visits on a regular basis, which brings the children's families into the library to pick up their children at the end of the program. The library started our Northwest History Collection over 40 years ago. It is a reference collection of over 1,000 books pertaining to Northwest British Columbia, the vast majority of which are First Nations content. Several years ago, the library was very honored to have Tsimshian artist Henry Green design our Halibut library card. We've also carried his design on our book bags and t-shirts. We love our Halibut card and are very appreciative of Mr. Green's work. Our newest addition to our circulating collection are the First Nations literacy bags. Each bag contains a beautiful plush puppet, a board book, a storybook, and a puzzle, all of First Nations design, including the carrying bag. They will also include book lists and activity sheets for the families to keep.
Hi, so I'm Wendy Wright. I'm the director of the Smithers Public Library, which is located on unceded Wet'suwet'en territory, specifically Giddenden Clan. And I am going to tell you a little bit about our town first. So the population of our town of Smithers is approximately 10% Indigenous, but there is a close by Wet'suwet'en community of Witset, and when we include that in our service area, then it's closer to 20% Indigenous. Now, the thing is, Witset technically falls within the Hazelton Library's service area, but because Smithers is a service hub, most of the residents of Witset travel to Smithers rather than Hazelton. And so to overcome this inconvenience for them, the 2 libraries have made an arrangement whereby Smithers keeps Hazelton cards, and we are permitted to register residents of Witset for a Hazelton card in Smithers, which they can then use at the Smithers Library under the Northwest Library Federation arrangement. So our panel has discussed some common aspects of serving Indigenous families and communities and has pooled our knowledge. So now each of us will speak to a different area of this topic.
Sorry, our screen are badly arranged here. So there we go. Oh, sorry. So we're not as organized as we'd hoped. Okay, thank you. Okay.
where you're starting?
Yes, this is. And you just click on through. So my name is Lorette LaPalme. I work at the Hazelton District Public Library with Ruth Cooper, and I was handed a great big word to be in charge of, and I wasn't quite sure what to do about it. This panel is here to speak about community summer reading clubs, serving First Nations children, and during the discussions I was asked to address the word relevancy, and I had to really think about that. I'm part of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, and a nation that lies between New Hazelton all the way to Burns Lake, covering an area of about 22,000 kilometers squared. So the word relevancy brings a lot of things to mind. First Nations people across the continent face many challenges and are surrounded by many barriers. Yet the essence of Summer Reading Club is about building bridges and about the love of learning. Relationship building is a gentle gateway that opens the path towards ensuring that your summer reading program is a success. And I feel that libraries as a social entity have the best chance of building the strongest bridges. Many First Nations communities have organizations that are already working on literacy-related programming and may have personnel that would be able to provide insider information about how to successfully launch a summer reading program in a particular location. Discovering who to contact is part of the journey towards success, and seeking this information can provide many positive paths to follow. The Hazelton region has the densest population of First Nations people in Canada. Two major nations, the Gitxsan and the Wet'suwet'en, are divided by the Bulkley River, a natural boundary that leads to one of the most important things to note when planning a summer reading program for your First Nations community. Each one is very different from the other. Each nation is a separate entity on its own, and what works for one community might fail in another, even inside a single nation. Each village has its own unique character, and one of the guidelines to developing a successful summer reading program would be the appropriate location and assistance of a culturally conversant person to lead those clubs, or at the very least provide input during the development of that program. One of the most important considerations to understand is the unique qualities of each nation. View British Columbia or anywhere with First Nations as you would Europe. What might work in France will not succeed in Germany, and you wouldn't expect it to, because they are very different countries with their own unique customs, languages, and history. Geographic proximity does not necessarily mean that the neighboring nations are similar. In fact, they could be as different from their close neighbors as countries can be when existing on different continents. This is a challenge for libraries to embrace and overcome. There are several elements that can be employed to highlight connections between First Nations communities and libraries, and the most noticeable is content. At the Hazelton Library, we carry many different publications that shine a light on the many different facets of First Nations culture. Please remember that all collections are an evolution. When small children see these books, it forges a connection between the child and their culture, as well as the library itself. Due to how history has played out, First Nations people have varying degrees of understanding regarding their own cultural background. Some have only the most basic understanding of where they come from, while others bear vast detail and comprehensive skills. Storytelling is one of the common methods of transmitting knowledge from one generation to the next and provides the easiest access point into a young person's sphere of interest. Children from everywhere love stories and love to hear them being told or how to read them on their own. Having a summer reading club situated within the community they are already familiar with makes that connection even easier to foster and maintain. There's so much to say about relevancy when it comes to summer reading clubs in First Nations communities, but so little time to try and fit in all the many topics and considerations that should be made when launching a new program. Ask yourselves questions like, where are you hosting it? The library? The community? Which facility and why? Who are your club leaders? Are the children going to be comfortable spending their time with those people? How are you going to ensure that you're culturally sensitive and that you aren't unintentionally being insulting, condescending, or making an invisible problem worse? There's a fine line between cultural sensitivity and cultural misappropriation. Summer reading clubs sometimes encounter problems far outside the scope of the program itself, yet libraries must be mindful that they are approaching communities filled with people who are immersed in several generations of social divides anxieties, and conflicts that have nothing to do with learning a new simple craft or spending an hour reading fun books with large, colorful pictures. Making progress means understanding that these complications exist, and while it isn't possible for a single library to overturn the negative impact of colonialization and the long-term harm it caused, libraries working together can help create new roads for all parties to travel on together as a community committed to progress, learning, and cooperation. As I've mentioned, there's much to say in many areas that need further discussion, so I invite those who are interested to contact me at the Hazelton District Public Library at my email address, which will be up there in a second, and to continue this discussion, and I will be happy to help as I can.
So I'd like to mention some of the factors that affect participation in both in our own communities, but as well in the outlying areas. There are many factors that affect participation in traditional summer reading club programs offered by libraries around the province, but more so by those living in remote communities. Most, if not all, of the remote communities in the North Coast and interior do not have easy access to books for adults or children. The school libraries are open during the school year, but only during school hours, only for the students, and usually not during the summer. This means that adults and preschoolers have no access to books at any time, and school-aged children only have access during the school year. The reality is that even if we can get reading logs into the communities and people in the communities who want to use our resources, the lack of access to books makes it pretty hard to run a summer reading program. Lac Aux Lambs School is renovating their building to enable access to the school library after hours and possibly during the summer for all members of their community. We will then be able to donate books to their library for all of their families to use. The Prince Rupert Library is also promoting setting up library accounts in the villages so that residents will have access to audio and digital books off of our website. But the cost of devices to access the books can definitely be an issue, as can the cost of internet access. There's also an issue of reliable internet connections in both remote and not so remote communities. Members of this panel have experienced such issues on a regular basis themselves, including during both of our Skype calls in preparation for today. The distance from these communities to the local libraries makes library visits nearly impossible. Residents in the westernmost communities in Hazelton service area must travel 75 kilometers one way to visit the library. That's the equivalent of traveling from downtown Vancouver to Abbotsford. There's no public transportation to some of the communities and inadequate transportation to others. In addition, many people do not have driver's licenses or access to vehicles. Prince Rupert's 4 communities lie north, south, and west of us. Lac Aux Lambs lies 30 kilometers to the north and is accessible only by a 40-minute car and passenger ferry ride and a 40-minute drive at the cost of $32 for car and driver. Metlakatla is reached by a 15-minute ferry ride costing $9 one way for adults. Unfortunately, the ferry only runs during the day and on weekdays. Kitkatla is 60 kilometers southwest of Prince Rupert and is serviced by a twice-weekly passenger ferry at the cost of $31 per adult one way, or a 20-minute float plane flight at the cost of $115 one way. Hartley Bay is the furthest south at 90 kilometers. The ferry ride is 3.5 hours long and costs $60 per adult, while the float plane flights are 1 hour long and cost $260 each way. As you can see, the cost of coming to town is prohibitive for many families. The cost of hiring someone to run a summer program is also a huge factor. Lac Aux Lambs was able to secure a grant 3 years ago to run their own 4-week program, but not since then. Prince Rupert does not have a budget to send staff or hire staff in the communities, but could possibly partner with the communities if they are applying elsewhere for such grants. Hazelton has relied on Success by 6 funds for their satellite SRCs, but with the demise of Success by 6, they're having to look elsewhere for funding. With the schools being closed over the summer, there's also the issue of finding space in the community to hold programs, and preferably at no cost. Hazelton has been fortunate in never having to pay for a venue to date. Delivering books and materials into remote areas can also prove to be difficult, as there is a charge to ship freight by air or by boat. In the past, Hazelton has partnered with the Lit Limo Book Bus to deliver donated books into the communities, but unfortunately, the bus has recently failed its safety inspection and is off the road right now. Creativity and flexibility are invaluable. Sometimes there are events in the communities that call for both. It could be that the community is busy fishing, so that your program may need to be moved by a week or two, or it could be that members of the community have passed away, and changes have to be made to accommodate the grieving process. Above all, it's imperative to be patient with the process. You never know when small seeds that have been planted years ago bloom into something well worth the wait. And now just a little bit about partnerships, but there will be documents as well on our website listing a lot more, and we'll look at that later. Partnerships can come in a variety of forms, whether you're looking for ways to bring First Nations families into the library, have accurate content in your programs, get SRC materials and books into the communities, or run a complete program in a community. There's an array of potential partners to help along the way. The community members will be your biggest and most important partners, remembering that no two communities are alike. Foremost in the whole process is being aware of and respectful of the proper way to approach the communities with plans and ideas. Respect the knowledge and protocol of each community. The last thing anyone would want to do is tell the communities what we think they need or should be doing. Instead, we can ask if there's anything we can do for them or help in any way by providing reading logs, manual and program ideas and materials, handout masters to photocopy, gently used books for the families to read, a way to loan library books to their program or community members, help download audio and digital books from the library's website, or piggyback on any other summer programs that they may already be running. It's so beneficial to have personal connections or contacts in the communities and First Nations staff in our own libraries to guide and educate in proper protocol and procedures. Learn as much about the community as you can. The communities around Prince Rupert each have their own websites with a wealth of information on the community, their history, culture, and contacts. Individuals you may already know within their community or yours can help as well. Our library has just made new connections in 2 of our communities through people who have recently returned or relocated there. One was a fellow partner at our 6x6 table, and one worked with our local health unit. Both have expressed a desire to have our library involved in their communities, and we've been invited to meet community members about this possibility and have been invited to attend a pole raising ceremony later this month. Look to your local school district for resources and connections. Our school district has an Aboriginal educational department, complete with a myriad of resources and locally produced material, and I'm hoping to borrow some of those for this year's SRC. They also have a Smaliak online talking dictionary, which we can put to good use for word searches and such this summer. Find out if the schools in the communities are part of the public school system or if they're independent schools. Prince Rupert and Hazelton have both within our service areas. You may already have contacts in the school district that can guide you to the right person to approach. And if you're having trouble reaching the independent schools, you may get help through the local band offices. The schools or band offices may also be helpful at finding space to run programs or locate bookshelves and totes in the community. Share your ideas with your coworkers and board members. You never know what connections they may already have or know who to ask. In our case, a board member learned through his day job that Hartley Bay is interested in connecting with us and having books in their community and on their ferry. Sometimes ideas come to fruition only to fall away and fall apart for a variety of reasons. The timing could be wrong, there could be a lack of people or resources to carry it through or continue on. The community may have more urgent priorities, or protocol may require things be set aside until a later date. It's important to not give up, but to accept that now may not be the right time. Things may change and it may work in the future. It's important to recognize the difference between offering ideas and pushing them on others. In our case, I thought it was that having books on the Lac Willems ferry would be a great way for the families to pass the 45-minute trip. We donated a tote of books and magazines, but we were never contacted to refill it. We brought another box of books, but when we weren't contacted again, we've set the project aside and are waiting to try it again. Funding, or lack thereof, can definitely make or break any plans you may have, but partnerships, past or present, can sometimes be a saving grace. Hazelton has developed strong connections with the public health nurses in the area and often use the health centers in the villages as venues for their programs. They also have close connections with the early childhood services in the area. Hazelton's used grants from Success by Six to fund their facilitators in each of the communities at a cost of $1,000 per site, averaging 7 to 10 sites per year. With the demise of Success by Six, they have applied to the Bulkley Valley Child Development Center for funding, but have yet to hear back. In the meantime, they've applied to the local health authority for a grant to get them through this summer. They feel that without these long-standing relationships with Northern Health and the Child Development Center, their SRC outreach programs would be facing huge difficulties this year.
So hi, I'm still Ruth and I'm still from Hazelton. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about recruiting and training community summer reading club facilitators for our outreach clubs. I'll give some examples of how we might adapt the basic summer reading club program to suit our communities and our outreach. As we've all said repeatedly, that networking, face-to-face networking and partnerships are key for recruiting facilitators and getting the library accepted into each village. So I'm going to give you a couple of recruitment examples. In Hazelton, we have the Send and Farm Project, which is a youth employment project that has a community service component built into it. On a couple of occasions, I've been asked to do the training program that I do for the entire Send and Farm cohort. They've then taken and given a summer reading club in 2 Mile, where the farm is, actually exists, another in Hagelget, Tsekia, where one of the members was from their home community. And from that one, what was exciting is a young mother who lived in Gittinyau, the village 75 kilometers away, took that same program and repeated it when she went home for the weekend on Sundays in her community. So her children got to participate in that as well. So another place where we've done some good recruiting is our involvement in PALS, which is Parents as Literacy Supporter. It's like a strong starter, ready, set, learn program where preschoolers get introduced to formal kindergarten and that sort of thing. And we got our very first ever facilitated club in Kitwanga out of those connections. So you also, as Beth mentioned, with face-to-face conversations with library patrons and all the other meetings that you go to. When we have recruited people to be facilitators, then we have to train them. And so I conduct a day-long training workshop in the library, usually on Mondays when our doors are closed to the public. And I come to library service with a background in education, and my philosophy is active experiential education and reflective practice. So when the training session starts, one of the very first things that we do is we role play a summer reading club where the people I'm training are the children and I'm the club facilitator, and we do the kickoff club where we go through the take-home bag with the reading records, explain how the stickers work and all of that sort of thing, and it's real experiential practice for them. Another active thing I like to do in the training is I have a collection of books set out on different types of books. There'll be regular picture books for children. There'll be nonfiction junior books. There'll be wordless books. There'll be books with a lot of First Nations content. There'll be what I like to call whiz-bang books. You know, you lift the flap or they pop up or the lights come on or something like that. I book talk each collection, and then each student who's being trained chooses a book from a collection of their choice, and we sit in a circle and we read the stories to each other so everyone gets to practice reading aloud, showing the pictures and that sort of thing. So last year's training material will be available on the website, as Cynthia was telling you about. And there'll be the PowerPoint that I had for last year's Summer Reading Club training, and the agenda for the training, and some of the assignments, the manual exploration assignment where we look through the manual and that sort of thing. Then what we have to do when you understand how you're going to do a summer reading club is we have to make several adaptations. We adapt the reading club in 3 main ways. We mainly deliver only 1 club in each community, and so it's a multi-age club. We have children range from 3 to 13 years of age. So one of the things that you can do with a craft, for example, is we make this lovely little dinosaur craft. Dinosaurs are always popular. And that can be a little challenging for the wee little kids and a little boring for the older kids unless you sort of prepare it properly. So for the intermediate age children, we will show them the main pattern and then give them a blank paper plate where they can draw their own, cut it out, assemble it, and decorate it all on their own. If we're dealing with sort of the primary age kids, we may have the pattern already drawn out on a plate. They can still do the cutout, the assembly, and the decoration. But when you get to the really small kids, it's probably a good idea to have everything cut out in advance. That's our craft kit. We use a lot of Ziploc baggies. And all the parts and pieces are there. They just have to assemble it and decorate it. And everyone can sort of finish their craft at the same time. They all have a souvenir to take home and remind them of what a good time they had at the reading club. So the payoff to that is the multi-age grouping is reflective of village practice and extended family culture and values. And you find that when you break children up arbitrarily by age group, that's a colonial strategy that's at odds with most of the village values that we look at. We try to take Summer Reading Club outdoors as often as possible. Our early years table identified a reconnection to the land as one of their priorities. We try to go along with that. But, and so that's a really good connection, and it shows that we're mindful of the wishes of our community members. But there's certain challenges to outdoor Summer Reading Club. There's dogs. In our area, there's bears. There's also wind. You know, don't plan a paper craft if you're going to be outside. You know, maybe rock painting's better. And that sort of things. But there are adaptations that you need to make to make the reading club fit the community. The main thing that we'd like to remind you to do is to be flexible. As Beth alluded to, like one year, we just had a lot of deaths in the community, and children were forbidden to come to the Summer Reading Club because that was fun and play, and they were in a period of mourning. And that's not just the day of the funeral. A period of mourning can extend for weeks or up to a year, depending especially on the status of the person who passed and the relationship of the children to them. But you have to go along with that. Otherwise, we'd be so disrespectful, you may never be invited back to the village. So those are things that you have to be mindful of. So to accommodate all the things that are going on in community, the main thing you have to be is flexible. Sometimes there's no simple solution, and you just have to try again. So in such a case, we're better off respecting village culture so that we'll be invited back later. To summarize, networking, face-to-face networking and relationship building is the key to getting summer reading clubs out into your villages. And it's going to help build trust. And now Wendy's going to suggest ways that libraries can develop policies to help it all happen.
Thank you. That was great, by the way, all of you. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about a policy and a position that the Smithers Library created to increase relevancy and engagement with Indigenous families in the SRC. So we have a popular SRC program. Every year we have around 155 children enrolled, but very few Indigenous children enroll. And also, several years ago, we discovered, to our horror, that there had never been an Indigenous staff member at our library. Remember, we have about 20% Indigenous population. So to correct this historical imbalance and to better reflect the community we serve, the board adopted an employment equity policy, which states that if there are multiple qualified candidates for a position, an Indigenous candidate may be shown preference. We also created a second summer reading club position, which is specifically for an Indigenous student. Their duties are the same as the first students who they work with to plan and deliver the program, but with an added focus on enriching the program with elements of Indigenous culture and promoting it to Indigenous families. The job description states that knowledge of and connection to the local Indigenous community will be considered a strong asset. In addition to reading Indigenous stories, past examples of activities involving this position include bringing in I was in the wrong order. No, go back.
Back.
There's Gwen. So bring this student, her studies are in Indigenous archaeology, so she had a number of activities planned around that. And also she brought in a traditional Gitskan Wet'suwet'en storyteller, which is the next one. There he is. And a community war canoe project. And the kids were able to participate in that and learn about the symbolism. A button blanket craft that included learning the names of the local nation and clans. Indigenous artifacts.
Here we go. We had it backwards.
And our National Indigenous Peoples Day tent at our local festivities, where long lineups of Indigenous children preferred to wait to have their faces painted by the Indigenous SRC student instead of other staff. So that was very clearly showing a marked preference for someone that they felt a connection with. So our one student brought in her mother to teach the staff how to sing head, shoulders, knees, and toes in Wet'suwet'en, which was so much fun, and which we in turn taught to the children at our annual campfire cookout and sing-along, which is open to the whole community. The most notable success arising from this policy and position is that because we delivered copies to, because we delivered copies to the Office of the Wet'suwet'en and Band Council, Friendship Centre, Work BC, and local anti-racism group, we now get lots of Indigenous applicants for all library positions. Last year, both of our SRC students were Indigenous because they were the most promising candidates out of the dozens of applications we received, and we have hired 5 Indigenous staff members in the past 4 years. There have been challenges as well. Whether or not more Indigenous children enroll depends heavily upon the students' connections in that community. Only one of our students has actually increased Indigenous enrollment. And when they left early due to health issues, those families left too. They were there because of that connection to that person. Not all students have cultural knowledge to share, while others have lots but cannot adapt it to the age level of the kids or to a library program. The unexpected outcome of this position is that everyone in our SRC is introduced to Indigenous culture, which advances reconciliation in our community. It's worth it.